And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bashing us, him.
Attention to roll call.
That's right. Good morning, everybody. 8:05 live Eastern time. And of course, it's with the Finest Unfiltered. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to our friends, listeners. I see the chat is already moving. We're going to have a great guest for you today. I think it's quite interesting. We have the CEO of Rekor. His name is Robert Berman. He'll be coming on in a few minutes, just coming on shortly. And the basis of this conversation is ultimately license plate readers. Now, the other day we spoke quite significantly about flock cameras. Big flock cameras are a huge conversation right now for law enforcement, for businesses, for HOAs, different various entities throughout this country right now. So definitely an interesting conversation. I look forward to having this guest, and I hope you look forward to it also. If you have any questions right now you're thinking about that potentially maybe we haven't thought of, or maybe something that we thought of, and just reiterate things that we should be asking. So throw it in the chat right now. Feel free. Let's get this conversation going. I think it's really interesting. I think we all should be paying attention right now, especially with the way the world has pivoted after 9/11 with the Patriot Act. These are questions that we should all be curious about right now, especially when it comes to data. We should all be thinking about data. So, John, Marlon, good morning. Let's just go around. Let's have a candid conversation, of course, and we'll get ready for Robert Berman. All right, good morning.
Yeah, I think, the state of policing is obviously in decline in law enforcement. Others will beg to differ with me, but the way I see it, law enforcement is in complete, absolute decline. It's in shambles. And what they're doing to prop that up, instead of bringing standards back and trying to hire quality candidates, what they're trying to do is grab any technology that they can. But I think you could give basically people everything and anything, and they could still ultimately fail. So where's the line between technology and privacy? And I think that's ultimately the conversation. Where does the Constitution kick in? Where does your privacy, how much privacy do you give up for safety? And giving up that privacy, do you get safety? And I think that's really a great topic. I'm excited to have the guest today from Rekor. Rekor has unique products, not just license plate readers. They got a lot of different products. I'm sure we're just going to delve mostly into the license plate readers. It's obviously a huge debate going on across the country right now. But I just want to say, nothing is going to make up for the human element of policing. All you have this phone. It has everything in it. It has history books. It has data in it. I look at some of these kids. I talk to some of these kids. And they I don't know how to get anything done. I'm like, you have everything at your fingertips right here. You don't know how to solve a problem? Look it up. Figure out what the problem is. Figure out the basis. Read about it. I'm like, when I had a problem, I couldn't call anybody. I couldn't email anybody. There was no such thing as any of this stuff. I had to go figure it out myself, go to the library, get a book. You have it all at your fingertips. And I think the same's true with law enforcement, and I just want to say I've been getting a lot of calls about Omar Habib. Oh, we're in the Bronx. The video doesn't look good on him. It is what it is. And I just want to say right now, there's a cop sitting in jail who did not injure somebody. And you have cops completely turn their back on him, and they want to justify their actions, and they want to justify what they did, and they want to justify what happened to him because he used a technique. So use a technique. You're going to call me, you're going to text me, you're going to send me DMs saying you're worried about me, you don't want to get out. You're not worried about me. You're not worried about the platform. You're not worried about Eric or Marlon. You're not worried about our credibility. You're worried about your own credibility. So let's get that out there. I stand with Omar Habib, and I'm sure Eric and Marlon stand with him for the same reasons. He was a cop. He went to a 911 job. The dude was much bigger than him. He deployed a technique, an illegal technique that the left told you is illegal. You could shoot an individual. He could have justified pumping three into the dude's chest, and we wouldn't be having this conversation right now, and he wouldn't be in jail. But he can't justify putting his arm around the guy's neck. Are you kidding me? So I mean, like it's sick. And then we just had two members of the service kill themselves in the last 10 days, right out of the NYPD. And it's another thing. It's always a justification. It's not the job, bro. It's their personal lives. It's this. It's that. It's that. It's always a justification. And then guess what? When you get into the shit, when you go to that 911 call, when you're having those dark days, guess what? Guess what? The same way that you were there for these guys is the same way people are going to be there for you. But don't worry about it, because you got a platform like the Finest Unfiltered that's unafraid to break away from the narrative and talk the truth about what's happening in policing and what's happening in the NYPD. So, you could save all your comments, save all your DMs, save all your text messages and calls. I don't care. Omar Habib did absolutely nothing wrong. Not only should he not be in jail, he should be out in the sector court. So.
Yeah, good morning, guys. Morning, chat. We got in there so far. Morning, Chief. Chief Marino's in there. Morning, Stephen S. Jack Greco. Who is this? Sad Vader Dad. Eddie West. Who we got else? We got, Rusty Dog. Yeah, Joe Mango. Good morning, guys. Yeah, Detective Nolan, I see you too. Yeah, this is a conversation that like we've been saying, America's going to be having soon. It's going to be dominating the headlines, and I think dominating the conversations at the dinner table as well. But I was doing some digging into some Supreme Court cases last night, and I gotta say, I'm a little more hopeful on it, because I think that fight is headed to the Supreme Court, and I think in a lot of ways the Supreme Court has already shown us their hand, and I think it's a hand that's going to win for America in general. I think also the you gotta hand it to these companies, right? These big tech companies, because they've managed to unite both the right and left on one thing, that that both sides don't like the pervasiveness of all those surveillance tools. So yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting conversation. I think you guys in the chat are going to be having a lively one of your own as well, because I think there's so much sides. We know our chat tends to get invaded by people with very, shall we say, one-sided views, and I expect that to happen today, because I think the industry, and I think people who are also involved in the industry all are basically, they have to wage a public campaign now to because both sides are kind of agreeing that this surveillance is pervasive. But anyway, we'll get into it, and morning, Eric.
Hey, good morning, brother. I want to get back to talking about Omar Habib. Now, I spoke to numerous cops of various ranks within the police department about Omar Habib. And unfortunately, most of them have said, listen, I don't think Omar belongs in jail, but he did choke the guy. So can we stop at this point? Here's my position. Let's stop having this debate about technique. What I want to know is, and let's stop it for a second. Let's not freeze frame. Was his arm around his neck, or what position it is? Can we talk about what we normally utilize to weigh out for a metric measure on cops using force? And that is, what was Omar Habib and his partners at the time confronted with? Were they confronted with an adversary? Were they confronted with a resistant perpetrator? Were they confronted with a confrontation? Were they confronted with a perpetrator, mostly disturbed person? What was he confronted with? Not what technique was applied, because there's different ways to skin a cat. Now, it's not about technique, because there's different ways to weigh this out. A technique could have been used using a firearm. A technique could have been used using a taser. A technique could have been brutal strikes or a chokehold. In my position, my perspective, what's the difference? And actually, if you weigh these out, and anyone that has any experience grappling, like myself, you would know that a chokehold is actually the most gentle form of force, and actually the most sensitive, and yet has a high capability of taking down a larger adversary. Now, some people have told me, the adversary was actually put to sleep. And some people, oh, it looks terrible, it looks bad. Because if you don't understand the chokehold, you might think that's terrible. Someone goes to sleep. In fact, watch Ultimate Fighter Championship, UFC, or watch different various MMA outlets like Bellator or One. Watch. People go to sleep all the time. Trained fighters go to sleep because that is a natural response. That response of going to sleep and what actually protects you. That's actually a normal response. I've actually been put to sleep several times training also. It happens. I've had an instructor once have someone show a technique, and that the instructor himself went to sleep by accident because it's a natural response to protect you when someone is choking you. So what is worse? Let's talk about scales here. You have an adversary, a large adversary, and you use brutal strikes and cause bleeding and broken bones and bring that person into the precinct, or someone that is a large adversary fighting and they're placed in a chokehold and they go to sleep. They wake up in handcuffs, no injuries. What do you think is the difference? What do you think is better? Because people don't know. I think it's their lack of knowledge, thinking, oh, a chokehold's so bad because someone went to sleep. It's actually a normal response. Going to sleep actually protects them. The brain and everything shuts off to protect them from something worse happening. It's such a very normal response. So this is absolutely ridiculous. I want to stop having this debate of what technique was used. How about we debate what was Omar Habib confronted with before we utilize what technique? What if someone is absolutely not trained and they use, or let's say, for instance, what if someone has to use, what if their punches are not effective? There are plenty of cops, female cops or male cops with small hands, don't know how to strike. Or what if you're striking someone, your hand breaks, and you have to use your radio to strike someone? Is that a problem? It's amount of force. I think this idea of technique is absolutely ridiculous. John, I can't believe we're discussing technique.
Dude, I'm like, I keep saying it, like cops are the dumbest people alive. And that's why you got to say, there has to be constraints on technology that you have because you're idiots. Like, I'm sorry. Like, it's ridiculous. What Eric's saying is, what happened to the totality of the circumstances? What happens to the right? You could use deadly physical force against somebody, but you can't use a basic control technique. Oh, he did. Oh, city council said that that's a felony. Wait, time out. What injuries did the guy sustain? Oh, none? Oh, so Omar should go to jail because, it looks bad, bro. Had the arm around the neck. Dude looked like he went to sleep. Oh, the guy that was drunk, bleeding all over the place because he was punching everything, insane. Not possible he had a panic attack. Not possible. So, but Marlon, what do you got? Hold on one sec. I just got to take this.
Yeah, I mean, is the life of the perp? I keep saying this. Is the life of the perp worth more than the cop? I mean, what the cop? The problem is the entire problem is that these perps escalate confrontations by resisting arrest and by getting into melees with you. Yeah. And that's problematic because now the cop has to defend himself. What are we saying? If we're basically saying that the cop no longer has a right to defend himself when the perp is resisting and fighting with you. And we're saying that, yeah, I mean, just that the whole idea that we've gotten this far is kind of absurd, and it's once again because the left is like the left is kind of like leading the conversation. So I think we're getting lost amongst the forest. Losing the because again, if the perp is larger than you and he starts resisting arrest, you're gonna have to defend yourself. And you keep in mind you have tools on you that if you are incapacitated or otherwise injured, that could lead to your death, if not other people's death, and that's first of all your firearm. So we have to consider the totality of the circumstances that led to the cop using a certain level of force.
Well, think about it. So going forward, Omar Habib has now set the stage in the case for, and I guess the reports in the police department should change as well, because now it should be what level of force was required and what technique was applied. Oh, I needed deadly force and I used my firearm, or I needed to stop a resisting perpetrator, and here's the technique I used. I used 3 left-hand punches. I used 3 right crosses. Is this what's going to get to, that we have to give the specific technique of what you utilized? And then are you going to have to testify to civilian complaint review board or on camera? Well, I deployed 3 jabs and 2 crosses and 1 uppercut. And then they say, oh, no, you deployed 2 uppercuts. You're wrong. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. Obviously, it sounds funny because this is just stupid. John, what do you think, brother? I know you had to take check something out. And you got cut off.
Yeah. Rob's just trying to get in. He'll be on in a minute. They're figuring it out. But he's jumping in now. But yeah, just last thing on this before we bring Rob up is, like, you know, we're getting to a point where NYPD officers themselves are being put under a microscope, and they're like, oh no, it's okay, yeah, it's good. And you want to do that in a dynamic situation? Like, do you really want to do that? You have a violent, resisting male in front of you. Do you want to be Omar Habib sitting in Rikers Island right now, facing 7 years in prison because he used a technique and the perp was uninjured? Like, it's unbelievable, dude. I went to Top Golf yesterday. You ever want to laugh? Watch 2 Italian guys from Staten Island swing golf clubs. Funniest thing ever. But it's a completely controlled environment. I have my brain and my mind to swing this club, and every single time, the club did not go where I wanted it to go. The ball did not go where I wanted it to go. And you want to do that when you're fighting with someone twice your size who's trying to kill you. And you're going to say, oh, no, yeah, look, I don't think Omar should be in jail, but he used it. Well, guess what? He's going to jail, and you're all silent about it. He's facing 7 years in prison. He's sitting in Rikers Island. He lost his career for an uninjured perpetrator. Absolutely ridiculous that anybody would sit there and justify that. Absolutely ridiculous. You know, who are you really justifying? You're justifying to yourself the way that the job that you're in and why you're continuing to do it. That's what the justification is. But without further ado, I'd like to bring up to the stage REKor CEO and Chair Robert Berman. Rob, what's up, man? With pleasure. Thank you for joining us. You know, it's been a wild few weeks watching this conversation. You know, we spoke about it, so I think you're just the right person to speak on it. So how's everything? Oh, Rob, we don't hear you, brother. We don't got you.
Yes.
Nope.
Still muted.
You're muted, bro. Hold
Rob,
on.
If you could exit and come back in, that might help your audio.
Yeah. I'm gonna pull you down. I'm gonna call somebody. I'll be right back.
Well, we'll iron that out and get that squared away. But you know, going back to before we get Robert on, and just going back to Habib, I think it's really it's so obtuse at this point that we're focusing on the technique, and that, you know, cops I've spoke to, some in particular, say, oh, well, I get it, he shouldn't be in jail, but I'd be okay if they fired him, because, you know, it's almost like the chokehold has become taboo. And I think it's completely opposite. I think chokehold should actually be embraced. Now, I don't believe you should just walk around and start choking everybody out, but it's a viable tool for force. And I think it's far more intrusive and causes less damage than using brutal strikes. And think about it. Ultimately, I don't know if the city council knew what they were doing, but they sure as hell got the byproduct and the outcome. The outcome that they've achieved is this. With the diaphragm law and the chokehold, they've restricted the ability for you to control another human being as a law enforcement officer without using brutal strikes. The reality is, and I'm telling every cop right now, even those that are trained, and they'll probably agree with me, it is virtually impossible for you to control a resisting, not someone who's passive. I'm not talking about the person that just puts their hands behind their back, or someone that is armed with a firearm, right? I think those are pretty easy. The academy does that well, right? It gives you, here's the perp that puts his hands behind his back, and here's the one that has a firearm. But in the middle, the person that you have to wrestle or grapple with, it's impossible for you to not violate the diaphragm law or the chokehold ban by getting someone larger without using brutal strikes. It is impossible. And why? Because ultimately, if you use brutal strikes, that looks terrible on camera. So ultimately, City Council has boxed the NYPD into a position where no matter what, when you're in a confrontation, you the cop, the optics will look terrible. Why? Because if you violate the diaphragm law by putting pressure on the chest or the back, you are potentially facing a misdemeanor crime. If you choke someone out, you're potentially facing a felony. And if you use brutal strikes, you are facing public opinion. Marlon, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's all deliberate. I think again, these are all actions done by like legislatures and politicians to handicap cops and to create more docile cops and to like re-engineer policing in general to be more reactive. And I said before that I've come to the conclusion now that the whole reasoning behind it is because of this new behavioral approach to law enforcement that a lot of these big blue cities are leading the charge for. Okay. And in order to get to that re-engineering and approaching violence and criminality as a health condition and a public health condition, you have to you kind of have to destroy policing as it was traditionally done for decades. And they're doing this on multiple fronts. They're doing this with things like the 30 for 30 initiative, which want to make 30% of police departments women. And what do we know about women? That by and large, physically, most women are going to have problems, you know, with getting a male suspect into handcuffs, okay, because of body mass and so on and so forth. So I think these are all initiatives deliberately meant to set us down the road to a future where police departments are replaced with things like the Office of Community Safety and there's no incarceration. There's a prescription of some sort of drugs, and there's biomedical surveillance outside of incarceration. And if you look at all the different pieces, it all adds up to you. If you zoom out, you can only come to my conclusion, and that's the conclusion that I've come looking at all these all these little facets that are, creating that docile, impotent police department that we see today.
Yeah. So, all right, we'll get back to Omar on Friday. Friday, we'll have a roundtable. We'll discuss that, a lot of other things. Let's bring Robert up now. Robert, what's up?
Well, hopefully you guys can hear me.
We got you.
You can hear me. All right, good. So, Eric, John, Matthew, nice to meet you all. And thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. So, good morning.
Yeah.
Morning.
So, yeah, lots of crazy stuff going on out there these days, right?
Yep.
So what do you want to talk about?
So, Rob, let's start off. What's REKor? Because we looked it up. Obviously, I never heard of the REKor. We everyone's hearing flock. I looked up REKor. I see it. I see you guys got a lot of products. You got products similar to Flock. What is REKor? What is the problem that you're looking to solve for law enforcement?
So, REKor is a public company, but it's really a startup, or it was a startup, and it was done in public company attire. These days, most startups are done and backed by Silicon Valley, right? And you don't see them until they're of a certain size and mass and revenue and so forth. So we took a less traditional path, right, which makes it a hell of a lot harder. But it started back in 2019. We had the idea of getting into public safety and transportation and using technology to make everything from our roads safer to our streets and cities safer. And that's how the company started. And where it kind of kicked off was about 2016, 2017. I met this brilliant young man named Matthew Hill. Matt is a software engineer. And back in 2012, he developed 86 lines of computer code that created the ability for any IP camera to identify a vehicle, including reading a license plate, right? But prior to that, license plate recognition was done by very expensive, highly specialized cameras. We call them OCR cameras. And they were few and far between. You'd see them at the entrances to the tunnels going in and out of New York City, the bridges. They were used in tolling. Just, by way of background, I mean, it started actually in Italy. The Italian post office hired a company called Leonardo to develop a system to help read the mail to speed things along. So Leonardo developed this software camera-based thing that was able to read zip codes and addresses and letters. And then they introduced that to law enforcement in the US through a company called LSAG. And that was the first ALPR, and that was the late 90s, early 2000s, right? But there were very few LPR cameras, very few. They were, a standard 2-camera set on a police cruiser was, 30 to 50 grand. A fixed camera could be as much as 100 grand. So you didn't see a lot of them. Right. But they were there and they were used and they served a good purpose. And then Matt Hill came along and he developed this code and he developed a product called Open ALPR, which we actually bought from him in 2018, which is how we started REKor in 2019 to build a business around it. But it wasn't just the concept of ALPR. Right. So when we were starting, others were starting as well, because Matt originally developed his code in open source, right? That's the way he did it. And then he crossed the wall with it and brought it and commercialized it and started to sell it as a product. And that's what really was the genesis of everybody that's out there doing this today, including companies like Flock, companies like Motorola, Axon, and others. They're all using basically the same foundational software code, which Matt developed, back in 2012, right? So that action kind of democratized the ability to have ALPR. So, that's what led to the proliferation of, tens and tens of thousands of cameras, right? And that's kind of the history of it. So that's how we got to where we are today.
Listen, Robert, it's a pleasure to have you today. We're actually looking forward to this conversation. We spoke about Flock cameras the other day. We've been touching on it. We spoke about it offline. We spoke about it on camera. So ultimately, I think let's jump into that, right? Because I think most people, even without any knowledge about the industry, they think about Flock, and
right.
it's been a common name that's been flown around. So could you tell us, for people that are maybe they don't understand the industry, what ultimately, what's the similarities and what's the differences between REKor and Flock, so that they could understand the industry?
Sure. Look, first of all, every company that provides, and let's call it vehicle recognition instead of automatic license plate recognition, because it just so you know, it's evolved well beyond reading a license plate, right? Like our software is able to detect make, model, color. It's able to detect things on the car like rust or dents or antennas or luggage racks or bumper stickers. So it's gone well beyond the idea of reading a license plate. Right. And, back in the day, the early 2000s, when there was less of it, it serves a really fantastic purpose. Right. It's a force multiplier for law enforcement when it's used properly. But the way it was used, okay, and the way it was intended to be used, and the way it should be used today, is that the federal government publishes a hot list a couple times a day. I think it comes out through the FBI. And those are wanted vehicles, okay, across the country for different reasons. But the vehicles that end up on that hot list, okay, get on there through a process. You just don't put a vehicle on a hot list. You have to go to court. There's got to be a reason. You have to justify it in front of a judge. So that's where it started. And frankly, that's the right thing to do. And that's basically, what it was operating around. And what happened was, when it became easier to put cameras up because it was less expensive, then companies went out there and started throwing money at it, okay, specifically Flock. And we saw what they were doing because we competed with them back in, the early days. And we couldn't possibly compete with them because they were giving systems away to law enforcement agencies saying, here, we'll give you 50 cameras, Don't pay for the first year. If you don't like what it does, you could take them down and you don't know what's the thing. Otherwise, you start paying the second year. We didn't have the resources to compete with that. And, we knew what they were doing. And what they were doing is trying to grab real estate, because once you grab enough real estate, you have a network effect. You cover the whole country. Okay. Now you basically control it, and it becomes a surveillance tool and part of a surveillance state. And, that's where we've landed. And it's really unfortunate because, the use of ALPR by law enforcement used properly is a really good thing. Okay. When used properly, think about, amber alerts or silver alerts, a child that's kidnapped, right? So outside of the vehicles that end up on the hot list that gets published by the federal government every day, the only things that could be added, okay, and they were by statute that they gave them the ability to do that, were amber and silver alerts. And that makes sense, right? A kid gets kidnapped, you have like 15 minutes or something to find them. Mostly they're going to be in a vehicle headed somewhere. It makes sense, right? But it's evolved well beyond that. So, once our competitors had these gigantic footprints of real estate, they started sharing data and crossing state lines and just giving anybody and everyone access to the data. But this includes everybody's data, because if you drive by a camera, okay, your vehicle's being captured, and it's not just, your license plate, it's, it's make, model, color, it's everything, so they have all your, PII, which is your personal identifiable information, right? So we started thinking about this back, I would say about 5 years ago. And we started to file patents around ways to provide tools for law enforcement to use LPR differently. But it's up to the customers to decide to do that. And it's up to the lawmakers to decide to create the regulations. And, our thoughts are that when you look at it, you start with that basic hot list. Okay. And if a vehicle is not on that hot list, when your vehicle passes that camera, the data from your vehicle should just be scrambled. Okay. Gone. All right. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not retrievable in the event of an investigation. So there's a robbery at a store, right? And the officers and detectives get some eyewitnesses. They think they've identified a 2020 Toyota Corolla. They think it was white. It was around, this time, it was there. You should have the ability to go back and look for that particular vehicle, or maybe even have a couple of plate numbers, but you should have to go to court to get a warrant to do that. So those tools exist. Okay. And we have those tools, right? We created that. We patented that, the ability to what we call anonymization of LPR data, or scrambling it, right? But it's just gone well beyond that. They've created these huge data lakes. So what a data lake is you're taking the output from all your devices, you're sending it to a central repository. Think about a data center. Okay. And all the information's there from this state, that state, the other state, this department, that department, even commercial businesses, right? And it all goes there, and then it all becomes searchable and accessible by anybody that has access to the system. And that's wrong. Okay. So when we listen to the argument that, or, the arguments that are being made by people on both sides, we agree with the fact that it's a very important tool for law enforcement if used properly. Don't agree that it's, you just rip them all down, because that would be stupid, right? But on the other hand, it needs to be used correctly.
Yeah, I think that's important. Like, and that's what I've been saying is, like, there's no nuance in this debate at all. It's either rip them all down, or if you're against, you want your privacy secure, then you hate the police and you want criminals to go free. And I'm like, wait, time out. You know what I mean? I'm like, we believe in technology. Like, as far as law enforcement goes, like, technology will help solve crimes, but to what what's like, do the ends justify the means is the question. And so I look what you're saying. Like, if your information's on the hot list, then only and then would your information be privy to be like, you would, your plate would get scanned,
Right.
and then ding ding, it would ding to law enforcement. Yeah, this person's driving here. The thing that I think people are afraid of is the privacy. So you said, like, it scrambles your data. Like, I'm Joe Schmo, I'm driving, scrambles my data, right?
Mm-hmm.
Gets me. I'm not on the hot list. I'm not I'm not a silver alert. I'm not an amber alert. I'm driving. You scramble my plate. But here you said we could go back if we needed to. We could get that warrant. How far can you go back is the question. And I think that's what people want to know. Like, why is my data being stored at all? Like, I'm not a criminal at all. And the other thing that I think people are getting crazy with is AI capturing this data and then building profiles about it and then disseminating that to law enforcement as if, hey, look, this looks like a criminal pattern, when it's a guy that just found a new fishing spot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts around that? Like, how long should that data be stored?
I think that with regard to vehicles that are on the hot list, the retention should be based on the severity of the crime. Okay, so let's start there. Okay, so, a felony should be, stored for a certain period of time, and so on and so forth. I think the storage of non-PII data, okay, I don't think it really matters how long it's stored, as long as it's anonymized and scrambled, and the only access to it, okay, is with a warrant, period end, through a company that has the ability to control that, and it's not going to be misused, right? I think, there's a misnomer about ALPR when people think about, this is just like law enforcement. Well, think about how often we drive down a road and there's a sign that says, pay later, we'll send you a bill, right? They're doing that with ALPR. The toll roads have been using ALPR for, at least 15 years, right? So every time you go through a toll booth, your license plate's being captured by ALPR. But, right, it's only used if in the event that there's a billing issue, okay? Otherwise, it's anonymized. So we provide software to certain toll roads. So as an example, Colorado E470 has been using our software for close to 7-8 years, right? But they only use it to reference against the RFID tag, or what we know as Easy Pass, right? Because those things don't work perfectly. You put it on the windshield, it falls off, your kids put it back up upside down, it doesn't work. And then the next thing you know, you're spending 8 hours on the phone with somebody trying to straighten out a bill, right? We've all been there. So, LPR is used all over. I mean, they're used by commercial companies like casinos. They use them for tracking players for their players clubs. So it's a lot more prolific than people think. But again, there's a right way to use it and a wrong way. And I think if we get back to using it the way it was intended, then it should satisfy both law enforcement and it should satisfy the public. You're not going to satisfy everybody. We all know that. Never going to happen, right? But if we don't do something about this, okay, it's going to get worse. And there is no question, not that we're headed towards a surveillance state. We're in one. Okay. I mean, it's getting worse and worse and worse. And with AI, yeah, there's a reason for people to be concerned. And, REKor has, taken the initiative to develop products, okay, that help the customer, but at the same time protect privacy. And, we have one that, maybe we can get into in a little bit, which is kind of the third pillar of privacy with ALPR, and that's protecting the integrity of a video itself. Because when you live in a digital world, okay, technology companies have the ability to capture your digital voice, your digital image, and we all know about deep fakes. And it's moving so fast where 3 years ago, to create a deep fake about Matthew here, if I got some video of him, I can create one and probably fool some people. But today you don't need to do that, because you could build it pixel by pixel from the ground up using AI. You'd never know the difference. So that's like my having the ability to steal your DNA. If I had the ability to get a hold of anybody's DNA here, I could go plant it anywhere and accuse you of something. You got a problem now, right? So there has to be layers of protection for privacy, okay, with ALPR and with, you know, just standard video, you know, digital video and audio. But it needs to be bundled together because you need it all. You need to protect the integrity of the video. Our chief technology officer, Chris Kadok, who's a brilliant guy, for the last 30 years, because he's been around video. He's a physicist, theoretical physicist by background. He's a mathematician, super smart guy. You know, he's been an expert witness in about a dozen cases over the last 25, 30 years, representing either the prosecution or the defense on the integrity of video going into court as evidence. And right now he's in a case, and it happened to be one of our cameras, that was an LPR camera, that it wasn't about the license plate. It was about something that the camera picked up while it was recording, and ended up in a trial. So he's actually testifying on that right now. So it's a combination of all those things, but we have to do something about it, and it has to be done soon, right? Got to be solved.
Here's something that really piques my interest. I'm curious. So if I'm on a public roadway and a REKor camera captures my license plate,
Right.
Something I've been thinking, who actually owns that data? Is it REKor? Is it the municipality? Like, who actually owns that data?
That's a really good question. So when we started, we made the decision that our agreements would say that the data belongs to the law enforcement agency that we're working for. Okay. In the first instance, meaning the primary data. The secondary data or metadata, which was the scrambled data or anonymized data, that we would have the right to use for other reasons, for training and different things. But again, there's no PII in that data. So we're just looking at a vehicle. So as an example, some of the things that we do outside of the ALPR, we have systems that can aggregate in real time and tell you greenhouse gas levels in certain areas of roadways. We can tell you smog scores in certain areas of cities. We can tell you the weight that's crossing a roadway over a period of time by classifying the vehicle, right? So if it's a tractor trailer, okay, we know the weight. If it's a truck, we know the weight. If it's just a standard car or a motorcycle. So, there's a lot of benefit to that, but you don't need the PII to do that. Like a good example is the Philly Navy Yard uses our tech, and there's 40, 50 cameras up down there. They're trying to figure out, as they're redeveloping the area, how to deal with the flow of tractor trailers and other things. And they're doing studies. So they're getting that information from the data that's being pulled from our equipment, but it's not PII. Okay. It doesn't include the license plate. It just says, hey, there's a sedan, there's a truck, there's a motorcycle. Right. So what we do is, when you pass one of our cameras, if it's for one of our police customers, then, we have no ability to create a network because we've never built a data lake. At one time, we did talk about building something called the REKor Public Safety Network. And frankly, we abandoned it because Matt Hill, who was the founder of the code that started all of this, had a problem with it. And his problem was exactly what's happening right now with Flock. And he said he just didn't want any part of that, and if we're going to do this, then we have to do it this way. And then it just became too cumbersome to do. And we said, let's just not do it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Good morning, Robert. I got to thank you for coming on because, not too many, people in the corporate industry would have the courage to come on, and answer these questions, and, I said before that before you got on that the industry has actually succeeded in kind of uniting both the right and the left into one thing. And that is that surveillance, that they find that surveillance is too pervasive. And you could just look at our chat. Our chat is very skeptical right now, But I think the last couple of years have kind of brought them to this position too. A lot of people, when we saw the things that government did.
Right.
But But my question is, we talk about the layers of privacy and protection to prevent government from getting uh you know from getting all this data. Uh, what layers of protection are there to prevent corporations from getting a hold of all this data and say, using it against us in ways that may benefit their bottom line, but may be, you know, uh, may not be so great for us. For
Yeah,
instance,
that's, Matthew, that's like, a really important point.
uh,
And I think that,
Robert's balling.
well, yeah, I it's, I will tell you that we don't sell data, okay, to third parties. I can't tell you definitively, and show you receipts that any of our competitors do. I believe they do. Okay. And I have, I have a problem with that, right? I don't want my data being sold, right? I mean, there's just so many ways to track us today, right? Whether it's Bluetooth or your cell phone or, just getting in your car. If your car was built post 2019, you're basically riding around in a computer that's got a bunch of cameras in it. You get into an accident and it's not about the adjuster coming out and looking at the car. It's about the adjuster pulling the video from the cameras in the car. Right. So we're so vulnerable because of technology, and, it's up to the technology companies to create the tools to protect the public. Okay. But at the end of the day, it's up to the public to do what they're doing, which is to cry out and force those that make the laws to adopt the regulations to make sure that this technology is used correctly, or you're going to have what we have now, which is it's out of control. Right. I mean, the flock business model from, a business perspective was, probably pretty clever, right? So you had a, very well-known, deep-pocketed group of VCs, and they saw the opportunity to flood the country with these cameras and said, let's just throw money at it, and let's buy up a footprint, and then let's, figure out how to monetize it and control it. And, there are a lot of law enforcement agencies that don't want to give that up either. Okay. But I'm sorry, but that's wrong. Okay. I think if you need the ability to use ALPR in an investigation, you should have the ability to use it, but to access that non-personal identifiable information, you need to go get a warrant. Okay. And then you should have the ability to do it. And then the tool is being used properly, and it's going to help solve crimes. Okay. And it's going to save lives. All right. But it's got to be used properly. And the horse is not going to go back in the barn. Okay. And ALPR is not going to disappear. What we're seeing is that, cities and agencies are just pausing things, hoping that, it's going to blow over. Right. And, and maybe in 6 months, things will be different, and then they'll just go back to what they're doing. Right. But that's not the answer.
Well, I mean, I think, we've seen this already in New York City, like where there's been concerns around databases that we keep, particularly the gang database. And they put so much restraints on the gang database, and that information literally goes nowhere. The police department doesn't even utilize that information to track you. They only use that information if a gang member is arrested in a shooting or is actually shot. They run you against that database to see if you are an active gang member.
Right.
So they know where to deploy to prevent further gang shootings.
Right. Yep.
So city council has already put constraints on that database. And I think it's working, even though that city council is trying to get rid of the gang database at all, which I believe is insane. I'm like, that is valuable information that saves lives, and it's good information. And that information is not shared with employers, with landlords, with schools, with anybody, right? It's just like an internal database that the police use in order to deploy resources properly to
Yeah.
prevent further gang violence. So that, in my opinion, is an example of data that, and FYI, if you're not involved in gang activity after, I believe, a year, you're wiped clean from the database. That's it. Can't go back in time. We can't look it back up again 3 years from now if you get back involved. That data is gone, you know? And I think the conversation you're having is an important conversation. So let's just pretend I'm an NYPD chief, or I'm in buying in the NYPD, and you are going to pitch your product. Like right now, you know, the whole debate of Flock and everyone else in this industry is that, you know, it's basically mass surveillance. What is the major difference in REKor, in your opinion?
I think the difference certainly is the fact that we don't have a footprint of their size, but technologically we do not, have a data lake. So we don't take data from different customers and put it in the same storage unit, right? So make believe you're looking at a storage unit facility, right, that has 100 little units, right? So instead of having 100 little units, you know, the business model is they just build a big building and everybody just puts their stuff in there and figures out how to sort it out. Well, that wouldn't work too well, you know? So it starts there with the concept of a data lake. And, you know,
Rob, not to cut you off, but you're saying that agency to agency wouldn't have access to each other's data, is what you're saying, right?
I don't think they should. I think that they should be able to access it, through a process. If something happens in one jurisdiction and they think that another jurisdiction can help them, and they're looking for something specific that the other jurisdiction may have, then I think, again, you got to go get a warrant and do it, right? So
Rob, one question for you, because and this is a kind of a tough one, because New York City believes that the NYPD shouldn't ever work with ICE ever. We personally think that's insane, and it doesn't make any sense why we wouldn't help our federal partners out. But for New York City specifically, I know the question will come up: would REKor share NYPD data with ICE?
No. No way. No, it's just not what this technology was intended to do, right? I think, look, we live in a country, or at least we did, and we still do if we can hang on to it. I mean, we live in a country of laws, and you think about what you guys do every day. You go out there, you put your lives on the line. You're forced to wear body cameras now, so I can't imagine what it's like to put one of those things on and then think about what I'm doing while I'm policing. And yet, everything I'm doing is being recorded, and, it's got to be really tough, right? But you have to think about things like, can I do this? Is there probable cause, right? And, so you have to follow the rules. And ALPR is a technology, it's a tool. It should follow the same rules that you have to follow as an officer. So if you were to ask me, like, if somebody convened a panel and said, okay, let's come up with some kind of standard for the use of ALPR, what should it be? And I would say that you start with, there's 3 pillars to it. The first is that the only data that should be captured, that's open, meaning that it could be accessed by the officer, the agency, whomever, are vehicles that are on that published hot list that go out twice a day from, I believe, the FBI. I think it's called the NCIC hot list. We upload it into every system that we've installed for our law enforcement customers. That's where it starts. The second piece is that everything else that moves past that camera should be scrambled or anonymized. We have the technology to do that today. We use a 64-character hash. All right. So that's something that's the equivalent of what a bank might use to protect people's accounts. So it's not something that someone's going to easily go get into. Right. But the vehicles, then I assigned a number. a 64 character number. So we still know that there's a sedan that's, pick the color, pick the year, pick the make, pick the model. And we still know that that vehicle's out there, but we don't know who that vehicle belongs to because we don't see the license plate. But it's there. Okay. But that's not interfering with anybody's privacy. If there's an investigation and the officers have good reason to go looking for a specific vehicle of a type, make, model, color that was around a certain location at a certain time when something happened, you should have the ability to go into court, convince a judge to go to the company and open that up. And the company should only have the ability to open that up if they're presented with a warrant. Okay. So that's step one, or the first pillar of proper use of ALPR. Then the privacy issue is eliminated from the standpoint of, just people that are just living their lives. Okay. Because you're dealing with hot list only, and anything beyond that for investigative purposes, which are necessary, okay, requires a warrant. That's following the law. Okay. And if you all look into what it takes to get onto the hot list, there's a process there. They just don't make it up. Okay. Those vehicles are on the hot list for a reason. Okay. I'll give you an example. When back in 2019, 2020, we were first starting to deploy systems, common practice is you install the system, you upload the hot list, and then you cut it over to the agency. And once it's cut over, we have no access. Okay, because we're not allowed to look at it. And we take that very seriously. So we had a very small system going in a very little town in upstate New York. And it was only, half a dozen cameras. And it was in the process of being finalized and was going to be cut over. And I was in the office with the guy that had gone up and done the installation. And he was working at his computer at his desk, cutting the system over. And he came and he got me and he says, I have to show you something. And I said, what are you showing me? And he said, well, I just saw something come across, a hit off our system, off the NCIC hot list. And I said, his name's Eric. I said, Eric, you shouldn't be looking at that. That needs to be cut over to the department. He says, look, I'm cutting it over. I looked at it. I saw it. I think you should look at this. So what does he show me? He shows me, okay, a hit for a vehicle that was on the hot list that was a known wanted terrorist. Okay. So what do you do with that? So we picked up the phone, called the police chief, gave it to him. He picked up the phone and he called whoever he called. And that was the end of it. We cut the system over. But my point is, just think about that. This little town is on a road that if you were going to drive from New York to Canada and you wanted to avoid the major arteries like 87 and 90 and all that stuff, you would drive and you would end up on this road. And this road runs through one of these little towns, right? It's like a 2-lane highway, right? So that's the route that this person was taking. Now, look, I don't know what this person was doing, right? But that's the point of that hot list. Okay, so you start with that hot list, okay, and you anonymize or scramble everything else. That eliminates the privacy issue. You want to search it, get a warrant. Okay, next level, second pillar. All right, create retention-based protocol depending on the severity. An example might be somebody's driving an uninsured motor vehicle. In most states, that's a felony. Okay, that vehicle may end up on that hot list, right? But does that really need to be on there for 2 years? Or does that need to be on there for a month? Or does that need to be on there for a year? Or if there's a warrant on a vehicle that's been, was used in, a triple murder. Okay. Yeah. I mean, the storage and the retention policy on that needs to be different. So the retention policy from what's on the hot list should be based on the severity of what we're dealing with. Right. And that should be decided by the agencies, folks like yourselves. The third piece, and the most important piece, I think, is that there has to be the ability to protect the integrity of the video. Okay, so that, let's use the words, it's born authentic. So in other words, at the time video is captured, okay, that it's signed cryptographically. You're using old technology, very old technology, to solve very new technology's problems, right? So that there is a record, almost like DNA, of the capture of video and audio. Think about a body cam, right? How important that footage is, not just the video, but the audio, right? Officer turns around, you know, you can't see what he says, but you hear him. You know, how do you know somebody doesn't change something? You know, in this day and age, it's not too hard to hack anything, get in and start manipulating video and audio. And because of the technology, it's pretty easy to do. So we have to protect our own individuality and our own person. Okay, so your digital voice and your digital image, if you're captured on a device, and every one of us is being captured every day 100 times or more, okay, if something happens, you have to have the ability to prove that that audio recording or that video recording is original or it was altered, right? There used to be a time where you walk into court, you know, got it on video, case closed, hang the guy, right? Not today, okay? So nobody's thinking about this. This has not yet become a national conversation. It will in the next couple of years. So what we did at REKor is we developed all of the technology for the tools that I just laid out for you for these three pillars. And that's the way we think that ALPR should be used, all right, and that folks go forward with it, okay? And even if a company like Flock has a gigantic footprint, okay, of 100,000 cameras, and they follow these rules, that would be fine.
Rob,
Right.
before we go any further, because we got a bunch of questions, we just got to go to our sponsor real quick, all right?
Yeah, sure.
So it's time from a message from our partners over at Kalshi. We make predictions every single day about pop culture, the economy, and the biggest stories making headlines. Kalshi is America's #1 predictions market platform. It lets you trade those predictions in a live market. Who will be the next New York City mayoral election winner? Right now, Andrew Cuomo, becoming the mayoral election winner, is currently trading at 7%, meaning a $100 trade would pay out $513. On Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there's no house. And as the probability changes, you can buy in and out of your position. For a limited time, download the Kalshi app and use code FINEST to get $10 when you trade 10. KALSHI, Kalshi, trade on anything. 18 plus only. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory. But yeah, no, look, I love it. One question for you, because I know we got a ton of questions still about
Sure.
the ALPRs, but one question for you about the authentication of video. Do you guys also do anything where if it's like AI? Because I see a lot of channels now on YouTube, and there's a lot of like accounts across Instagram, and people can't tell, but they're AI versions of these people.
Yeah.
They're not even actually.
Yep.
I ran into this dude. I started asking him. I was like, "Oh, I saw the video you did." He goes, "What?"
Yeah.
I was like, "You just put a video out." He's like, "Oh no, that's not me. It's an AI version of me, and they type in a script for it, and it reads it out." He goes, "I don't even know half the stuff that it puts out anymore."
Yep.
And so does that product, and I don't know the name of it, does that actually authenticate whether or not that's AI?
So our product is called Go Secure, and I want to tell you the origination of it, because I think you'll appreciate it. Back in late 23, one of our law enforcement customers, in combination with one of our transportation customers. So REKor does a bunch of different things. So, you know, we have tools out there that DOTs use to help manage, traffic on roadways to make them safer and other things. And by the way, that all uses AI, and it all uses scrambled or anonymized data, so no PI, and it does some amazing things, right? But he got a phone call from a customer that said, we're reporting into the Federal Highway Safety Board every year all this data for counting vehicles, which is how the federal government figures out how to redistribute gasoline excise taxes. I don't know. It's some system that was set up back in the 60s, right? So they have to send this data in every year. So they literally, if you ever see people counting traffic on the roadway with rubber tubes, they're pulling them across the road, that may be what they're doing. So this guy calls and says, how do we know that the data that we're getting from your devices is not being made up by the AI, and you guys are just not billing us, and the AI is just making up numbers, And Chris really thought about that, and the guy's right, and again, his background, he's testified as an expert witness in cases on the veracity of video. So he started thinking about it, and in middle part of 24, he came up with a solution that uses old technology. So it's cryptography, right? So it's basically signing each frame of the video as it's captured, okay, and tying it to the device. So we actually can tell you that this video, okay, was taken by this device at this GPS location on this time and date. Each frame is signed, and then what's proprietary about it, we have 11 patents around this, is the way we anchor and chain the frames together so that a video can't be clipped, right? So if I show you a video of somebody pulling the trigger and killing somebody, okay, that's it, just put them in jail, right? But what about the 10 seconds before that you didn't see where that guy pulled the gun, right? So you have to be able to tell whether a video has been clipped, because everything is clipped. You're going to take our podcast probably and put it out in a bunch of clips, right? That's what we all do, right? So you have to know whether the clip has integrity of the whole. So what you have out there today, or to your question, is you have a lot of tools that are AI looking at AI. So I'm not going to name the names of the tools, but you put it in there, and the AI tells you probabilistically this is 97% made by AI or not. But that's probabilistic. Okay, you can't go into court, all right, with probabilities. You have to go into court with certainties. You have to have the ability to say this is 100% certain, or at 1 minute and 12 seconds between that time and 1 minute and 22 seconds, this video was altered, or the audio was altered, or the audio and the video was altered with 100% certainty. That's the product we created. We literally just released it less than a couple months ago. Okay. What I find amazing about it is it's, again, old technology, okay, for dealing with AI, right? Which is the newest of technologies, right? And, think about the importance of body cam footage going into court. How much body cam footage ends up in an evidentiary proceeding, right? Dash cam footage, and then just general security camera. I mean, last year alone in the United States, believe it or not, there was $50 billion of fraud in the insurance auto industry alone from falsified videos and pictures. You use Geico, they have an app. You get into an accident, take a picture of the accident, you upload it in the app, not that bad. They do all the adjustment over the phone. Picture could be altered, right? So you gotta, have that piece of it. And I think that third leg of what we're talking about, and we've already put it on our ALPR software. It's running on our ALPR software, right? So the ability to be able to look at video and audio together and say it's real, okay? And it's not, the file level, it's at the clip level, it's real. Or this is exactly where the frame was changed. Okay. We don't know what changed, but if it was altered, it was altered, right? If it's somebody hitting somebody with a hammer and it was altered, well, then you got to question what it is, right? So if you go take a look when you get a chance at gosecure.video, there's some examples on there. It's really amazing tech, but it was born out of the idea that we were being questioned by a law enforcement customer saying, hey, how do we know that what you're giving us isn't being created by AI, right? And that's the world we live in. And this, of all the problems, right, of all the problems, is, I think, the biggest problem for us as individuals and human beings, because, think about it like your DNA or your fingerprints. Okay. I mean, you can create a great case with DNA and fingerprints, right? And then if you had a video to top it off, that would be great. But what if you got your hands on the DNA because you grabbed the glass that somebody drank out of, and you grabbed the fingerprints and you planted them, and then you made a fake video? That person's done. All right. The ability to prove that that video is not real or real could really make a difference in somebody's life, depending on what the issue is. Just another simple example. I mean, for those of us with kids, my kids are older, but, young kids today, bullying's a big deal, right? I'm sure you guys talk about it. It's a big, big deal, right? So your kid gets bullied in school, right? And somebody does something really horrific and they go put some horrible video up on one of the social media channels. Okay. Who do you go to get it taken down? And how do you do that? The only leverage you'd have is if you can prove that that video is not real, because then there's a legal responsibility on the other side. They will listen to you. Okay. But if you just go crying to them, oh, my son or my daughter, they're going to ignore you. So dealing with the integrity of video is probably the biggest issue we're going to be facing in the next few years, because you're 100% right, John. It's getting worse and worse and worse. And the ability to create digital deep fakes does not require, using old video of somebody or taking the four of us right now and then just manipulating this. It can be done pixel by pixel by AI. You cannot tell the difference.
This is a phenomenal conversation. I just want to tell our audience, our listeners, and how important this conversation is, and to credit you for coming on, because these conversations are not scripted. Robert doesn't know the questions that are going to be posed to him. So I give you a lot of credit for coming on here, not knowing what questions you may have to face. And I think that just shows the kind of person you are. So I really appreciate it. So with that being said, I saw recently that Flock acknowledged that some California agencies that inadvertently plates were accessible by out-of-state law enforcement agencies. So I think to myself about civil liberties. And what concerns me is, ultimately, I don't think anyone, if you're driving on a public roadway, I don't think anyone's frightened by your plate being captured one time. But I think ultimately what most people are concerned about, and I would say for myself, if my plate is captured and on numerous agencies have connected together, what is stopping them from creating a pattern or a profile on myself of where and when I travel, because of all these networks that are intertwined and connected, especially since, I saw with Flock that they were inadvertently captured by out-of-state agencies. So what are your thoughts on that, right? Because we're talking about civil liberties, and what should someone be thinking about this?
It's terrible. Look, let's face it. We're living in a surveillance state. if people, just don't want to say that, then, they're afraid to say it. Look, REKor is about integrity and privacy and public safety, and that's how this company was founded. And we're under attack for it. Okay. And we're an easy target because we're a small public company. People don't like what we say and what we do and some of the products that we're developing and the things that we're doing, because, it cuts against where they want to go. Okay. So I think it's terrible. I think that, the ability to track people and then create patterns. Okay. And if you just take that to the next level, Eric, and say, all right, you know what, now that I got Eric's pattern of driving for the last month, I can say that, this is what he was doing. And now let me go create a video that adds to the story and something else. And the next thing you know is your life is upside down. Okay. There was a woman, I remember seeing the video not too long ago. I forget where it was, but the sheriff came to arrest her at her house because they, using ALPR cameras, and I think they were Flock cameras, that they saw a pattern of driving from one county to the next, and I forget, what the ultimate issue was, but they came to arrest her, okay, because they were looking at her vehicle, right? And it turned out something like her husband has another job, and every other day, I don't remember what it was, but there's a video out there that if you search for it, I mean, it was horrible to watch. I mean, people shouldn't have to deal with this stuff. We've got enough problems, and again, technology companies are responsible for developing the safeguards, the guardrails, and the tools, okay, so that their customers can use these things properly. Period. End. Right. But the customers have to do that, and the public has to demand it. Right. And I think that there is going to be a change in the way ALPR goes forward, and I hope that it lands along kind of the lines of what we talked about, okay, whether it's us doing it or somebody else doing it, that's fine, but use it the right way.
So Rob, my car drives past the REKor camera, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What do you know about me? I'm not on a hot list. I'm not on anything, like, because I think it's amazing technology. You're saying you don't even need a plate. Like you could basically identify the car based, and if you could just go into that, like what data is it holding and what data is it scrambling that could be accessed later without warrant?
So we have multiple different ways to deploy our software. So when we deploy software with hardware, it's typically done at what we call the edge. Okay. So what that is, if we're all familiar with the cloud, right? Everything goes to the cloud, right? So we're talking through the cloud right now. So when you look at, let's say, someone like Flock, what that really is, when I first saw the first Flock camera back in 2019, I got a kick out of it, and I said, hey, it's pretty clever. Basically what it is it's a trail cam. Okay. Inside a box, with a modem and, some equipment for the solar kit, right? And it takes 10 really still quick pictures, and it shoots them up to the cloud, and all the processing is done in the cloud. When we deploy a camera, all the processing is done at the edge, meaning that the GPU itself is where the camera is. And the only thing that goes to the agency are the plate reads. Okay. Everything else is stored at the edge, 60 days, and then it's gone. Okay. So that's the business model we use. Now, I want to be clear. We have no control over what our customers do or not do. Okay. But we do not, in our agreements, allow for sharing of data unless there's a specific agreement between two agencies to share data. I did tell you we were going down the road of trying to develop this public safety network, but we just never got there because it was too cumbersome and the laws didn't permit it. So we abandoned it. And Matt Hill was Matt's a very ethical guy, comes from a military family. He just didn't want any part of it. And as the founder and developer of all this stuff, we thought we better follow, his ideas, because he kind of created this all. So we process at the edge. And that's what's out there. It's out there for 60 days. And that's basically it, right? So what we know at the edge is we do have, or the agency does have, we don't have it. Okay. That's another big difference. Okay. We have zero access right now to any of our law enforcement customers' data. None. Zero. Okay. The only way we would have access is if somebody opens up a customer service ticket because the camera's not in focus or something's not reading. There may be a period of hours or a day where, our technicians are in there fixing something. Beyond that, we're out. The customer has the data. We have access to metadata, okay, which basically is, telling you nothing. It's telling you, there's trucks, there's cars, there's motorcycles. And then we aggregate that against other things to come up with things like weight and score and congestion and smogs and things like that, right? So we have no access as a company to PII. Okay. As to our competitors, I don't know. Okay. I know some of them do. Some of them have as much access to that data as their customers do. They sell that data to third parties that are unrelated to the primary cause, right? Like you mentioned it earlier, the idea of selling, license plate data to ICE. I couldn't sleep at night. Okay. I don't care how much money they paid our company. That's just not something that I could live with. Right. That's not what this technology was developed for. It's just not, and people that come up with reasons for that are, just pushing the edge of the envelope for things that don't deserve to get the time of day. So we don't sell data. We don't have access to the data once we install a system. Where our technology is deployed, and it's not law enforcement, it's all anonymized, okay, with the exception of tolling. But we don't even have access to the tolling authorities' data reads that they're getting from our software. But they're only using those data reads against billing. Okay, that's all they're using it against, right? So, that's what we do. And frankly, like I said, it's been a challenge for REKor because, it's a struggling small, public company that, was a startup, and it's a lot easier when you have hundreds of millions of dollars behind you with VCs to just go conquer the world. When you're trying to bootstrap and build something a different way, it's harder when you're trying to maintain your integrity at the same time, right? But we knew that this day was going to come, right? That there was going to be an issue with this because we saw what was happening with it. We saw what they were doing, right? And it's terrible. Look, they announced, was it yesterday, that they're going to a 7-day retention period, right? So I think that's Flock's most recent solution. So what does that mean? So they're only going to keep your personal information for 7 days? Why are they keeping it at all? Right?
That's my question. Thank you very much. That's what I've been thinking. Why have it at all? Even for seconds.
I've heard every argument there is to have. All right. And I've heard the arguments that, look, driving's a privilege. You get a license, you have to have insurance, you get a plate, which gives you the ability to be on a public road. So therefore it should be in the public domain. And therefore, government should have access to it. No. Law enforcement should have access to it if they want to pull up behind your car and run your plate. Okay. They're taking their lives in their hands when they're getting out of that car, figuring out what's going on there. Right. But that doesn't give, people the right to just start collecting this and selling it and monetizing it and slicing it, dicing it. And who knows how many different ways this data is being sold and used. There's probably way more than any of us think.
So Rob, there's been a lot of misuse in law enforcement, right? Unfortunately, there's always been, and there still remains, integrity issues, even all the way up at the top chains of the police departments across the country, right? It's just an unfortunate thing. People go bad sometimes, right? You got people that take an honorable profession that aren't honorable people sometimes. Not all the time, but it's there. Issue in the NYPD is upper echelon management who have came under severe scrutiny under the previous administration, and well-deservingly, because they were doing things that crime families would do, not an actual police department.
Right.
They give themselves ghost access to databases. And ghost access is basically like, oh, we need to be able to look at all of Eric's stuff, and he shouldn't be able to see that for, integrity purposes, for internal investigations, when really it's like, Eric's dating the girl I like, and I just want to get Eric, and so, like, I know you're saying you don't own any of the data, but in my opinion, like, anytime a law enforcement officer accesses something, especially private personal information, there should be an audit trail for every single person.
Sure.
But traditionally, when the NYPD takes any database, they have an audit trail for everybody but us, because we're morally higher and, we have all the integrity in the world, even though we're the only people with all these horrible corruption scandals. We don't want anybody. What are your thoughts on that? Like audit trails in the system, and how do you think, like going forward, like law enforcement, or actually, I want to say legislators really should attack making sure that these queries and these searches are actually what they're saying they are, right? Like, how could I just walk in? Like, I saw some audit trail from Flock, and I was like, "What the hell is this?" Guy was like saying test, 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 test. He was just writing test, and I'm like, that's not accurate. Like, should there be coding done to protect it, and should there be an audit trail? And what type of oversight would you recommend? Obviously, you're not in the oversight industry, but like, what would you recommend to keep everybody on the up and up?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really great question. You're raising a good point. And look, we the public, we put our faith and trust in law enforcement, right? We do expect law enforcement has a high standard, right? And I believe in the majority cases that's true. Okay, but people do bad things, sometimes impulsively, unintentionally, whatever. But given access to something, somebody tells you don't look behind the curtain, you can't help yourself, you go look behind the curtain, right? People do things. So I think that, again, it starts with the foundation, which is that if you're limited to the hot list, okay, then that solves a really big part of the problem. And beyond that, when it comes to investigative purposes, the ability to go in and use the tool and the database that's in there for investigative purposes, the audit trail should be the warrant, right? I mean, it should be the whole process to get the warrant, right? And then the warrant should be entered in the system, which would be the key that would unlock your ability to do that, right? So I think that those are easily built into the system. So if you look at the back end of our ALPR platform called Scout, it would not be hard for us to build those rules into the system, right? So you just enter that information, and then it'll open up that portion of the data to you based on the information in the warrant, right? And I think that creates the audit trail. I think the technology company has to build the rules into the system so that the officers have the ability to make those entries and make it simple for them to do, because they've got enough to do, right? And that solves the problem. And it's really not all that complicated with all of this. It really comes down to just saying, let's use ALPR for what the original intent was and go back to it. That's the way it was used back in the early 2000s. Actually, New York and I think Maryland at the time were the two states that had, if I'm not mistaken, centralized, in other words, all of the data from any and all LPR systems. And again, there were very few because they were so expensive, right? Maybe there were a few hundred in New York. I mean, at the most, between mobile and fixed, believe it or not, the whole state, right? And I think back then, New York and I think Maryland created a central repository for LPR data, and they were having that managed by that company LSAG, who introduced all the stuff back when. So let's get back to basics and use the system for what it was intended, and let us give you the tools to be able to do that, right? Like, we already have the anonymization tool, or the tool to scramble the data. Not a big deal. Tell us to turn it on. It's on. Right. I mean, look, we would commit to that today. All right. We won't sell our software to an agency that doesn't follow those rules. I mean, but we're a small little company. We don't have the clout, right? So it doesn't mean anything. Okay. Flock has this gigantic network effect. You have Axon, you have Motorola. They're so entrenched between, the different systems that they supply for law enforcement that it's hard to get law enforcement to pay attention to, a smaller company that says, and again, it doesn't matter who sells the system. I'm not saying it has to be ours, right? But just follow the same rules. Everybody should follow the same rules, right?
Oh, go ahead, Marlon.
No, I was simply going to say that I'm skeptical whether legislatures can do anything to prevent abuse, and I'm also skeptical whether we can build it into the systems, because I think human nature, I think a lot of this data is like I don't know if you've seen the movie The Lord of the Rings. This
I
is
have.
one of the characters.
Yeah.
He was so obsessed with the ring. He even in
I
his
know.
death, he was happy to get the ring. And I
Yeah.
think in a lot of ways, all that data is the one ring for a lot of law enforcement executives, and
Mhm.
it's just it's too compelling for them to resist it.
Yeah.
And I also think, unfortunately for the industry, that a lot of the skepticism that you guys face are because of what big tech has done in the past. Give you an example. When a lot of us initially signed up for Gmail and for using Google, none of us thought that all of our information would be used for many other things.
Right.
And I think a lot of reasons why the public is skeptical is because they think, okay, we might be okay with using ALPR cameras today, but what happens to the data later on?
Yeah.
And even though you may have policy that limits the retention window, does the retention window really matter with AI? Because the AI can quickly parse that data and make assertions about you, and do all kinds of other things, quickly, faster than a human being can do so, and therefore it basically shrinks that time frame that they would need to retain the data to actually use it for anything. So I just want to point that out, that I think that a lot of this data is too enticing for a lot of people to resist, including, as I just said, companies in the past like
Yeah.
Google and
Yeah. So, Marlon, first of all, I owe you an apology because I've called you Matthew 2 or 3 times. But I think part of the reason for that is you're wearing a Yankees hat, and I have to tell you, I'm a diehard Mets fan. I don't know, that may be a little bit of it.
You better,
right?
you better get his plate. You better get his plate and find out if he's going to make games.
Hey, I live just outside of Philly now, and when I go to Met Phillies games, I mean, Phillies fans are nasty.
Oh yeah,
And I had my 11-year-old granddaughter there with me last year with my son, and like they were like, I couldn't believe the way they were behaving. So, but that's a whole nother story. But look, you raise a really interesting point here, and I will tell you that, look, this is the world we live in, okay? And frankly, the majority of it is bullshit. The tech companies have the ability to put the guardrails and the controls on all this stuff, but that's not what they're doing. That's not what they want to do. That's not where the world's going. Okay. I mean, look, as a guy that runs a tech company, and I've had a really, interesting past and landed here with this, tech scares me, right? I don't like, frankly, AI for the most part when I see certain things and where it's headed. But there are ways to use it that are beneficial, okay, that add value, especially when it comes to public safety. And I do think that what you're saying is true. Human nature is human nature. Power corrupts, right? And, absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? Isn't that what they say? So like I said, don't look behind the curtain, leave the room, you look behind the curtain. People do that, right? But the ability to build those guardrails in and control that exists. It's not hard to do. Tech executives will tell you 9,000 reasons why they can't, and they're not telling you the truth, right? I mean, it's not hard to change this, okay, to what it needs to be. It just needs to go back to serve its original purpose. It's a very simple changes. I think look, both sides have to agree, both sides being those that want to rip every camera down in the country and don't want any ALPR. That's not going to happen. Okay, so they have to understand that that's not going to happen, and maybe not all of them will, but for the most part, I think you can get the majority of them to agree that's not going to happen. On the other side of the equation, being law enforcement and big tech, okay, law enforcement is going to have to realize that we're going to have to use this tool the way it was used properly back when it was started, in law enforcement. And it still has fantastic, tremendous value from an investigative purpose, as well as things like Amber Alerts and capturing vehicles in real time that are on that list. And they'll have to live with that. And they're going to have to live with using it properly, right? The tech companies are going to have to live with a product, okay, that makes money based on what the product does, not the derivatives that you make out of it by selling and reselling and reselling and reselling and reselling the data again and again and again. Okay. And that's where we have to get to. And, we better start having a conversation about data integrity, because we're all going to lose our individuality. Okay. The minute someone has the ability to create a digital, video or audio of any of the four of us here. Okay. Look, I could take this, meeting, the last hour and a half or whatever, and run it through an AI program, and you wouldn't know that it wasn't the original podcast, and we'd all be saying different stuff. And, you have to have the ability to get back to the root to say, here's the original. Okay. And, we have to build those protections in. So we need those pillars, right? In ALPR, you need those 3 pillars, right? And then with all the other digital stuff, you need the integrity piece, right?
So
and that's what we have to do.
So Robert, in simplest terms, right? Talking about potential fears and what people maybe be frightened of when it comes to ALPRs and their concerns. Just in layman's terms, ultimately, where do we cross those boundaries? Where do we go from an investigative tool with great purpose to mass surveillance? Like where do we cross into those boundaries?
I think I think you cross the boundary when you're just collecting data and it's sitting in a data lake and it's accessible to anybody for any reason. Okay. So there's no guardrails there, right? So, with regard to an investigation, all right, I would assume that if there's an incident, right, that happens, let's say, in a shopping center or something like that, I don't know, or in the parking lot of a shopping center, right, and there's going to be an investigation. So what are the officers doing, right? They're looking for evidence, they're taking pictures, they're talking to people, they're gathering information, right? And as part of that process, I would guess that the officers that are working on the case together would sit down and say, all right, what do we got here? And, if one of the things that pops up is, hey, you know what? There was a suspicious car that seemed to be, driving around the lot for half an hour prior to that and was seen 2 minutes before the incident. And, nobody got a plate number, but it was a whatever vehicle, make, model, and color. Maybe we should see if we can get a judge to give us a warrant to go look for vehicles that were, there were some cameras there. Let's see if we can find that vehicle and get the PI and go and interview that person. That to me would be a justifiable reason to ask a judge. And I think a judge would say, yeah, I mean, you got 2 eyewitnesses, you got this, that, your logic adds up, right? Isn't that the way it works? Right. So that's, you're not crossing the line, but you're going through a process, okay, to access that database, right? But you have to have justification for it, not just, let me go search a database and, you know what? Maybe the guy's not in Utah. Maybe he's in Colorado. Oh, no, you know what? I think he went to Georgia. Nah, he's in Florida. Well, now he's in Maine. So you're just searching a data lake all over the place. And that you can't do that. That's mass surveillance. I mean, that's the ability to track, all of our vehicles every day of the week, create patterns, and come up with a reason for whatever.
So, you've been super generous with your time. So, just my last question. I'm sure Maul and Eric also have questions for you. Appreciate you coming on here. But we had a little debate, us three, when we did the episode on the flock cameras,
Mhm.
and I was saying that, like, what I believe should happen if, like, I'm not on a hot list or I'm not anything. I believe that my data shouldn't be scrambled. It should just be expunged from the system. Totally. Is that, and I believe it's a possibility, and I believe you said that, but is that a possibility to do? Should a government agency come to you, a law enforcement agency, say, look, we're not allowed because we believe this is mass surveillance, like these people aren't committing any crimes. Is there a way to do that where that data is just completely ripped out of the system?
We could turn that on today with any of the systems that we have. If one of our agencies called and said, we want you to delete immediately any hit. If there's no hits from the hot list, we want all the vehicles that pass the cameras to be deleted. Yes. The answer is yes.
And
Okay.
not be accessed later. Like there's
and not be accessed later.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
The ability is there to do that.
So I was right, guys. I won that point. That was it. So whatever you got.
Not that hard. Not that hard.
That wasn't a debate that we had.
Not that hard.
You can replay the video. We got it saved. Don't
No. Maul and I both said it shouldn't be stored at all. And
well,
it wouldn't be stored, right? In that case, it wouldn't be stored. Okay, it wouldn't be stored at all. And by the way, storing video. One of the reasons that Flock does what they do versus what we do is it's a lot less expensive to send still pictures to the cloud, okay, than to operate at the edge, okay, with full video recall, right? We chose to do that because we're also in the roadway intelligence business, and again, do things for DOTs. I have nothing to do with personal information, but help manage traffic and congestion and public safety and things like that. So we needed the ability to operate at the edge to do that. So, but we can do both. But it is expensive to store video, especially if you're going to the cloud with it, but not the metadata. But absolutely today, there's not a single ALPR company out there that could not immediately wipe clean any data that passes a camera that's not on the hot list. There's not a company that couldn't do that today.
Could you do an AI version of us on our networks when John would be the smiley happy guy and me and Mom would be the angry ones?
Absolutely. We'll do that for you.
Let's do that. I got a question because I'm curious. I think it's, I was thinking, you're talking about cost and effectiveness. So I had spoke about this offline. I said I wanted to ask you, I'm curious. So the NYPD, for instance, for cost-wise, the cameras that they already have in place, just regular cameras, can regular cameras be converted into ALPRs, or they would have to get actual new cameras?
100% they can be converted to ALPR cameras.
That's interesting.
Yep.
That's
As a matter of fact, when the city was looking to do congestion pricing, okay, a couple of years prior to them doing anything and putting those big ganches over, I lived and worked in Manhattan for years, right? So I'm from New York originally. I'm from outside the city, but they were doing an RFI looking for ways to do it. And in the district, I think, which is from 60th Street down or 61st down, right to the tip, there's a camera on every corner, right? And we said to the MTA at the time that we can run the congestion program pricing for you and get it started in 2 weeks, and you don't need to install anything. We'll just make use of the existing cameras that were there. And they didn't.
They decided to spend millions of dollars and put.
Well, I think they spent $500 million and put ganches over the street and everything. But the answer is, to your point. So this again, Matt Hill, really a brilliant young man. He changed the world. Just a good person. He was messing around with what we call a neural net, right? So a neural net is kind of a version of AI, and he was trying to create a neural net. So think of creating a brain, right, that had the ability to have a sense. Okay, so he chose sight, right? So when he was exploring how or what he was going to do, he chose to do license plates because it's kind of easy. So he did this open source. He had engineers from all over the world help him and developed it. And the way it works is that just like we're looking into looking at each other through our cameras and whatnot, the neural net, the algorithm sees exactly what your eye sees as if you're looking through that camera. So it doesn't matter what angle, it doesn't matter what height. There's a little bit of distance involved. It's limited. It depends. It could be 100 feet, 200 feet. But if you recall, okay, going into, the Lincoln Tunnel or the Holland Tunnel or crossing the GWB, right? And you think about those highly specialized cameras that are angled down towards where your plate is. You can picture them in your head, and they have a bunch of cones on the front of them. Those are the old OCR cameras. Those cameras probably 150 grand, right? And those were focused right on your license plate. I can take a $200 GoPro and hang it on a string, off of a piece of steel right next to the toll booth and do the same thing as that camera does now. That's what democratized this. That's what changed it, right? So that's how the technology works. So just it sees what your eye sees. So if you're looking through the lens of a camera, it's seeing what you're seeing.
Yeah.
Pretty crazy, right?
I'm blown away.
Yeah.
Quick comment. I don't expect you to answer this, Rob, but I just want to put this out there that we haven't touched on the fact that a lot of jurisdictions, especially in like big blue cities, seem to be lowering the threshold for obtaining legal authorization for a lot of things like data or being able to simply open cases on you for things that are
Yeah.
kind of nonsense,
Yeah.
and that's something that we should worry about, because even though you may need a warrant to obtain this data, we have laws like this one in New York, and I've
Yeah.
talked about this before. It's terroristic threats. It's still vaguely defined what a terroristic threat is, but yet if you say something that somebody reports, or somebody of prominence reports it to the NYPD, you will have an intel case on you, and that intel case is easy for the PD to justify running numerous database checks on you, and including getting an administrative subpoena on you. So I think that something we have to be concerned about is jurisdictions lowering the threshold in order to get that access to that data.
Yeah, and just like an example of that, like I was very vocal about New York City's vaccine mandate. It's the reason I'm no longer in the New York City Police Department.
I
And
heard.
that's exactly what the NYPD did to me.
Right.
Is they labeled me as a domestic terrorist for telling them what equal opportunity law was, and talking about people like Marlin and all these other people that they terminated for absolutely no reason, and how they did not follow their own religious accommodation guidelines at all.
Right.
And so I think that's another thing of concern. I definitely agree with Marlin, but how much of that, like, can you blame a company for the misuse of a government agency? And I don't think, I think that I don't really think you can, to be honest with you. I think it really falls at the feet of the agency, not the technology, because there's plenty of technology they could misuse, and even without the technology, they would misuse that already, because they've done it, and we have examples of that. I mean, it's happened to us. So
look, your life, your body, right? And I think what Marlon's talking about here is, it's a scary thing. I mean, it's starting to feel. I've got 5 kids; they're all in their 30s, right? I worry about them because it's starting to get a little bit dystopian for me, right? And it's hard to figure out I'm trying to choose my words carefully here, but it's hard to figure out where this is all really being driven, right? In part, I think some of it is, the technology and the power and clout that some of these big tech companies have. It's just things just don't feel right, right? And like, we shouldn't even be having this conversation, right? I mean, this is about law enforcement, public safety, protecting people. ALPR was around for a long time. Okay. Nobody ever thought about it. Nobody brought it up. Nobody even knew it was there, right? It was being used, right? And why are we talking about it today? Because we're living in a surveillance state. That's why we're talking about it, right? So we gotta change the way we use these things and get back to it. And ALPR is a really good test for people, for the people. Okay, to see if we can, it's not exactly helping me and my company, but to see if we can get the government to, come to the realization that they have to regulate this a certain way and create a standard for it and force it, right? And that's what has to happen, right? And I think that that's a question that is just not resolved, right? I don't know who wins here at the end of the day.
Yeah. Hey, Robert, I just want to say you have been an awesome guest. Seriously, none of these questions are prepared. Robert definitely is very knowledgeable. Before we go, we have a couple of minutes. I want to say thank you so much for giving us your time. And if you can tell us, separate from REKor and ALPRs, if you could just, like I said, we got a little bits and pieces. We know you're a family man, definitely a Mets fan. You talked about, living outside.
Definitely a Mets fan. Mets fan, Jets fan. How's that?
If you can tell us, if you can tell us a little bit about yourself and where people could find you on social media if they want to connect with you, and we appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I'm the CEO of Rekor Systems. Our company trades on NASDAQ under the symbol REKR. Primarily just use LinkedIn, not a big social media person, never have been, tried to stay away from it. And I was born in New York, right? Lived outside the city up in the Catskill Mountains back in the day, spent most of my life in the city working. And
too much surveillance on social media, right?
I don't like social media, guys. I mean, what Marlon said earlier, one of my old friends and early partners, we were around during the heyday of the .com era, right? And I remember when we first saw Google, and it was funny because he was telling me this is like the evil empire. He refused to use Google, and his name's Scott. I'm like, Scott, what the hell is your problem? This is a search engine. This is great. He said they're going to save everything you search, and they're going to start selling you shit for starters. And then it's going to get worse from there, And that was like 1998 when he said that. So, I think he was right. So we got to start turning it the other way. And I think if maybe some of the tech executives out there actually maybe get on the side of what's right here, then maybe things will start turning different directions. So,
yeah.
But what's that?
No, and just before everybody goes, it just crossed my mind. I just want to let everybody know this is absolutely not financial advice, but I am a shareholder in REKor, and I just want to there's no interest
Thank
here.
you.
Robert didn't pay me any money to come on here, or any of us. They're not sponsoring the show, but I just thought about it. I'm like, I should probably say that. I should probably let everyone know, but that is not financial advice. We're not giving financial advice. But
REKor is a whole nother story because, as I mentioned, when I started this back in 2019, thought about, Silicon Valley and decided to take this route for a variety of reasons. But doing a startup in a public company is very hard because it's transparent. People are not used to the ebbs and flows. And, when you're private and you're, big company and they just throw money at you, right? Like, so you get a guy and say, hey, go out and create a network of 100,000 cameras. Don't worry about what it costs. Here's all the money you need. Don't worry about losing money. It's different. And ever since we started taking these privacy positions and operating a certain way, you know, our company is, you know, like been under attack. So, but that's a whole nother world of small, you know, micro cap companies. But, you know, we're going to break through it, and Rekor is going to made it this long, and we're going to survive. And I think we're on the right side of this issue. And I just, I know we're definitely in the right place with regard to video integrity. And I encourage you guys to look into that issue, right? Because that's a big one. That's really a big one, right? And it's a little piece of a tail off ALPR, but it's something we're going to be talking about in the next year or two.
Absolutely. Yeah. We'd love to have you back as things arise. If you have time, it'd be
absolutely.
awesome.
Listen,
it doesn't have to be 2 hours, even if you just come on for a quick segment, 20 minutes.
I really appreciate you guys having me on. It was fun, and I enjoyed it. So thank you much. Okay.
Yeah. Robert, as I said before, thank you so much for coming on today. Really been a pleasure, and getting to know you, and the fact that you answer these questions unprepared and
anytime. Happy to do. You guys were great.
Who's the best Met? Who's your favorite Met? Mike Piazza?
No, my favorite Met goes way back. So we're going all the way back to Tom Seaver.
Oh boy,
nice.
We got to go back. I'm one of those guys. I'm still hanging on to my early '70s Knicks team back in those days.
Well, at least we could agree on the Knicks then, at least.
All right, Knicks we can agree on.
Let's see what we get to this year. All right, man. Take care, brother.
All right, listen. Thank you again.
Take care.
Appreciate it. All right.
All right. Nice to meet you. You got it.
All right, so that was interesting. I mean, I learned a lot there. I think I'm more polished on the on ALPRs, and I like I said, I think that like kind of the discussion what they're having, we were having last week, and we didn't even know, like, really, we didn't really know them like that. I know they were into traffic management and all these other things and smart cities. So, obviously New York City DOT won't use them because they're looking to create congestion. So they're trying to alleviate it. They're like, the New York City DOT is like, where can we put a bike lane? Where can we put a bus lane? But I do think that is something that major, I think not even just major cities. I think anywhere where there's a population growth or there's stick points, governments should be looking at. I just was watching something on Clover, not on Clover Road, on Forest and Victory. They just threw a bus lane there. The bus lane wasn't big enough for buses. Then they made the bus lane big enough for buses, but the lane for cars sends you into oncoming traffic. So it's not big enough for the car. It's like, what are you guys doing? Like, I mean, and that's common sense. You don't need anyone to look at it for you, but like, I think that's a really interesting aspect of the company. Like I said last week, I don't think ALPRs are going anywhere, and I think there needs to be regulation around that. And what that is, I mean, obviously that's still being discussed. But the cool thing that I really love is the video authentication. There's video authentication, because I do think that's something that we need. You see Nolan, he makes videos about me every day. I mean, the voice doesn't sound like me.
Those are real. That was you with the long hair and the chubby body.
Long hair, but there are programs out there that could literally replicate your voice, and you would have absolutely no idea that's not you. And Marlon had suggested to us to let our family members know that, like, if anybody calls and it sounds like us and is saying something weird, hang up the phone and call us back.
Yeah.
To make sure, make sure it's us. And so I thought, I was like, he's right. And so that is it. Look, it ain't going away. Like, the genie's out of the bag, but we got to figure out how to regulate this and how to make this constitutionally compliant.
Yours would be easy if you called your wife all happy and smiling, like laughing. She'd be like, "What is this? This is not my husband."
Yeah. I think the industry has to figure it out, and because the public already has an opinion on this, and it's not in favor of the industry. And I also think the industry has to figure it out, because this is going to have a chilling effect on them, on innovation and on their recruitment, because young people aren't going to want to, who wants to go join a surveillance company, So, and if you're not getting young people to come in, how you going to get innovation, and how you going to compete with China? And don't get me wrong, China has their own problems, because I think they have, I don't speak on it from China's side, because I don't live in China, and I'm not a Chinese citizen. Okay. But if I was a Chinese citizen and this was the Finest Unfiltered version, the Chinese version of it, right? I would say, it's already having a chilling effect on our innovation because China is great at copying us, but they're not too great at creating a product from zero. So I think my point is that this has a chilling effect on technology and on the innovation because young people won't be willing to create these products, work for these companies because they don't want to be part of that surveillance apparatus.
Yeah, but Marlon, my thing is this, right?
Mm.
First of all, they don't buy themselves. They put a product out, right?
Mhm.
They put a product out for government to buy, right? For
Mhm.
government agencies or private corporations to buy. Who do you think's more likely that the government agency is going to go with? The guy that's actually saying, no, I want responsible data collection and I want privacy protections in place? Or are they going to go with the product that allows them to do warrantless mass surveillance? And I'm going to say they're going to go with a product that allows them to do warrantless mass surveillance. And you're like, it does not, I don't believe it falls on the company. I believe it falls on all legislators and it falls on law enforcement. They swore an oath to the United States Constitution when they took their jobs, when they won their elections. And it's incumbent on us as Americans to ensure that they're doing that and regulate these problems, because I agree with him. He said ALPR is a test. When he said that, what is he talking about? It's a test for future technologies. We cannot be trusting private corporations to be constitutionally compliant. We need laws, and we need politicians, and we need law enforcement agencies to ensure that, in fact, they are constitutionally compliant with their products. And we don't have that currently. And
Well,
that's what
mm.
needs to happen. There needs to be legislation put in place immediately.
Yeah.
Well, sure, but my point is laws are for the law abiding, right? Laws are always for the law abiding, and also the industry. Like the reason why I'm saying the industry needs to figure it out because you look at how Congress is a mess. You look at local legislators are a mess themselves. Look at our city council. If you're waiting on them to do the right thing, you're going to be waiting a very long time. So I'm simply saying if the industry wants to continue being profitable and getting these contracts and finding the perfect balance between safety and civil rights and the right constitutional rights of the public, they need to figure it out. Because if they don't, and if they wait for legislatures to figure it out, the public is going to make them figure it out on their own, and that's by destroying all of these things. And it's going to become cost prohibitive then for these counties and these cities to put up these cameras because it's going to keep getting destroyed.
Well, the problem with that also is, laws are man-made and they're arbitrary, right? So if they decide retention could be 90 days or retention could be 30 days, I mean, there's going to be a lot of mistakes made throughout this. This is a new product. This is new technology, and new laws are going to have to be legislated. And there's going to be Supreme Court cases, just as you referred to earlier, with ALPR. There's no doubt about it. So, which means there's going to be mistakes along the way. Ultimately, what is the right answer? I think the bottom line is, how do we ensure that civil liberties aren't violated? Because I think ultimately the questions that we asked made me now, like, I thought he was very knowledgeable, but I'm more frightened by it now than I am even before, because the more knowledge that we got about it actually makes me even more concerned. Because ultimately what he said, and what I read about flock cameras, especially what had happened in California, is inadvertently out-of-state agencies have gotten information. Like, how does that happen? Where is this pipeline? Who actually owns this data? I mean, think about this. We asked him, can the NYPD convert cameras? They said could convert any camera. That's pretty scary.
Well, here's something even scarier, Eric. Even if they don't do it here, some other country is going to do it. If we have partnerships
Exactly.
in the NYPD, we have partnerships with other countries. If me as an investigator can tie a case to a foreign nexus, I'll just send it to the liaison. He'll work with the local PD. They'll get information that I need, send it back to me, and then I'll use it. Okay?
Right.
So
You
what
say, I didn't
are you
check
guys
it.
suggesting? We don't put any legislation in, and we just hope that the corporations that are profit motive driven, they come into regulation? Like,
No,
I don't
that's not what
understand
I'm
what the
saying.
argument is.
No.
No,
What's the argument?
we're saying that the industry can figure it out a lot faster than legislatures can do it.
But for the industry is going to figure it out to make less profit. Like they're never going to do that. Like that's insane to think. That's absolutely insane to think.
No, but what I'm saying is they figured out to make profit, because if they don't figure it out, they're going to be unprofitable in the long run, because the public will destroy those cameras, and then it becomes cost prohibitive for jurisdictions to keep putting those cameras back up.
The cameras are cheap as hell. $200 cameras. They don't care, dude. It's not like I don't think that those cameras getting destroyed. How many people are destroying cameras? What's the percentage of Americans that are destroying cameras?
It's how
0.000000. Like what are we talking
for
about?
now.
How many people fought back at the mandates? Not a lot.
Yeah, but you see, the mandate started
That's true.
something, and there's a lot of nihilism amongst young people, and I think they're going to take that nihilism and put it to something productive, which is going to be a fight against big tech and the surveillance state. And remember, I talked about before that I was fascinated by young people liking retro, and there's a big. I've been watching a lot of different sources that keep talking about that, and I think that's all ties into the anti-AI push. And a city like New York could afford to keep putting up flock cameras, but that small county in rural, I don't know, Georgia or rural New York State can't afford to do it. And that when the people there keep destroying it, what are they going to do? They don't have enough investigators to investigate it all. They don't have enough cops to man those posts or to continuously drive by those posts while on patrol.
They don't. They put up a new GoPro, $200, $50. They get from Amazon. They get cheaper cameras. Like the bottom line is there needs to be legislation. Like if we're not calling for legislation and you're hoping that profit motive driven businesses are going to regulate themselves and get less business from government agencies that are willing to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on this tech, then you're out of your mind, because it's not happening. It's just going to get much worse. It's going to get much, much worse.
Spot on. I agree.
Yeah, but also keep in mind, we already have Supreme Court cases that say you can't do this.
But you don't have politicians holding people accountable to it, and you don't have law enforcement agency abiding by those decisions. So there's your major problem. There's your major problem, because in those specific states and cities, they do not have legislation around it, and they do not have audits on it, and they do not have any. And that total infrastructure needs to happen. I personally think there needs to be a completely new agency put up just auditing police departments, not just for their crime numbers, but for with their technology too. Because look, I'm not going to knock the Trump administration, but I am going to knock the Trump administration because I'm watching Kash Patel take credit for crime drops across the country when we know for a fact major departments are completely not giving the actual crime picture, and we're gonna say there's this major crime drop across the country, and it's like, well, is there really? Like in DC, there was a major crime drop. The same DC where you just fired all those chiefs from for blatantly lying about crime statistics, and stay trained up. And we had this conversation last week. Stay trained up. He says, let's worry about Flock, but forget your mini computer in your pocket, YouTube, Facebook, X, TikTok, your TV, all what you're generating, keeping data in you grant voluntarily. Well, again, I'm going to say that there needs to be regulation around all of that. And all of those things you did not voluntarily give. You had no ability after you bought the product to say no, but I still want to use the product. You get the product and they say, all right, if you don't want to accept this, then you can't use our product. And it's like, well, you didn't tell me that ahead of time. You told me that after I already purchased this product. And now I'm sitting there and then I can't use my television. I can't use my phone. I can't use your email account. I can't use any of this stuff. And so all of that stuff needs to go backwards. And honestly, what I hear from you staying trained up is very apathetic, because you're like, who cares? They already got it anyway. Screw it. Yeah, don't worry about it. Go get your COVID booster and let's move on then. There's nothing here, There's nothing here. Let them surveil all they want then. Let them do Wi-Fi map out your home and let you see everywhere you go. And we give them data because who cares, Mom? They already got it, And you could be like the unions, bro. We'll run you for union president. You could be like, yeah, no, just let him, it never worked anywhere in any city or state, but we're going to give him access to the pension funds because you know why, Mo? He might give us something good, Mo. That's why. Yeah.
Coffee and donuts?
Yeah.
I before we do that, I just want to say it's not a zero-sum game. I think we do need laws, but that's what I'm saying. Stay trained up's comment. Stay trained up. The difference between that and Flock is that you still have a say in the phone in your pocket. You can not get a smartphone, and also we traded off our right to our privacy with those smartphones to get a benefit. Those cell phones provide a lot of benefit to us, right? And there are people who literally make a living because of those cell phones, because of those smartphones. In fact, this podcast would probably be a lot smaller had it not been for that smartphone in your pocket. Okay, because there are a lot of people who don't have the luxury of sitting at home and watching us daily. They're on patrol, they're doing something, and they're listening to us via the phone. They're watching us via mobile YouTube. So there's a benefit to that. What's the benefit of putting flock cameras all over the place on public roads that aren't connected to infrastructure, sensitive infrastructure? So, coffee and donuts.
All right, let's do it. All right, we only got one today, you cheap bastards, and it comes by way of Upstate Detective. He says, "Good morning, brothers. Where I work, several flock cameras have been destroyed."
Wow, interesting. Well,
yeah, a lot nationwide, a lot, especially.
Nolan's not giving any coffee donuts today after he got scolded. So,
yeah.
Who's Marlon? You talking about Matthew?
Yeah, listen, I think I have more concerns right now, more questions. I think it's scary that we talked about this offline before we started, and I was saying I really want to ask him about the cameras. Can they convert cameras to ALPRs? He said pretty much they can convert any camera. Think about that. You probably can convert some cheap ass camera to an ALPR. It's scary. We definitely need legislation, no doubt about it. But the problem is with the legislators, and this is man-made laws, they're going to make mistakes, and there's going to be a lot of civil liberties violated to the point, that's why we have Supreme Court cases, right? Because we have to review these cases because there's mistakes made. Ultimately, that's what Supreme Court cases are, right? It's mistakes or analyzation that's come to a head. And it's the same thing here. I mean, but I agree with you, John. I mean, ultimately, it's the same thing with that's kind of what the NRA says, right? The firearm companies make firearms to make money, and it's responsible gun holders that should have guns. And then there's people that are out there that obtain guns illegally and use them improperly. Should the firearm companies be blamed for that? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's the same thing here.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And Nolan says he would have donated, but I won't read it. LOL. Look, this isn't your platform to like slam two guys that nobody literally gives a fuck about. Like, you want to go debate them, start a podcast, dude, or go on their podcast. I don't know. Like, you like make these connections with us and all these people, and like you make them up in your head, dude. Like, we don't hate you. I don't ban you from anything, but I'm not gonna read like stupid things for no reason. It's ridiculous. John, you and hot dogs, blah blah blah. Like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, I was completely being honest with you. Like, go get help, dude. There's something wrong with you. Like, how you're making the connection between us and them is I don't know. I have no idea. Like, so I care about you, so I let you stay here because I don't want to shut people out. Like, it matters, but you're not going to use it to like, oh, here's $5. You're going to read my attack against these people. Like, no, dude. Like, we're not your little bitches. Like, so, like if you want a fair comment and you want to say something, yeah, we'll read it out. You want to just talk about hot dogs and Lee? I mean, it's ridiculous. I'm done. As a matter of fact, it's the last time I'm ever mentioning their name again. So it's ridiculous, honestly. And if I was them, bro, I'm not kidding. I would file an order of protection against you because it's insane. It's literally insane. Like, I see why Resnick did what he did, because you just frustrated him so much that he just forgot he was a public. He forgot that he was a public figure, and he had the NYPD do a search warrant on your house and arrested him.
I think Nolan needs a flat camera on his car.
Yeah, and he probably has.
Sure, it's like over John's house
now, and I'm like, look, I believe in America, but I also understand people saying, all right, something's not right here. This guy's emailing me all day long, I think Resnick overstepped. I do think he overstepped, but at the same time, you got to admit, you got to admit, dude. Like, I think most people would say there's something wrong here. Like, we should do something about this.
Hey, it looks like there's some more coffee and donuts. They heard you say you cheap bastards. And
all right. Mon Samurai, he wasn't happy with us today. He said, for the excellent effort, always like, subscribe, and join the surveillance state. 359K strong. Look, and someone said it on here. They said we got a clip where he says it's a surveillance state. Like, he's not wrong, dude. Like, I don't disagree with you. Stay trained up. It's 100% right. And I don't love it, but it is what it is. Like, that's why I bought Planeteer at $15. Like, it's going that way. Like, I'm not going to sit there. Oh, I'm so morally big. I'm not going to invest in it. I'll tell you right now, I should have invested in Moderna when they were all the way down and they jumped up 195%, because I should have seen that one coming. Like, oh, we just created this great mRNA product. I'm like, I should have invested in that too. I'm not going to feed my family. Like, it is what it is. Don't be friends with dishonest money. Don't be loyal to it though. You know what I mean? It's all right to be friends with dishonest money. It's okay.
Well, I just want to say that keep in mind that AI spending is 10% of the GDP. So the problem is that a lot of jurisdictions now they're going to depend on the money that comes out of this to to help their budgets, especially like in New York and Wall Street. That's why I think New York is head over heels with all of this stuff too, because they need Wall Street to boom so that Mamdani doesn't have to keep begging Hochul for money every year.
Yeah. And Dan the Man says, thanks, guys. Just letting my bank know I watched this podcast. Don't worry, bro. They're only going to track that data for, like 60 days or something. And then NYPD 8311 says, best question of the interview. Eric bringing out New York City spent $500 million on their own system.
Yeah.
Next thing we use our pensions.
Yeah.
Cameras.
Yeah. Don't think that it's all going back to all of that.
Yeah.
They're investing.
Unbelievable. All right, peoples. We appreciate everybody. Thanks everybody for joining us this morning. And let's keep rocking out. Finest Unfiltered. We will be back at you Friday, but make sure you tune in to Ron and Rob tonight, 17:05 p.m. military time or 5:05 p.m. Eastern time tonight. They're gonna have Tom Sullivan on.
17:05 p.m. I haven't heard that. 17:05 p.m. I love it.
Whatever. I got dyslexia when it comes to time. But you know what it is. They got Tom Smith going to be on tonight. I'm sorry, Tom Sullivan's going to be on tonight. You're messing me up. That's why Tom Sullivan's going to be on tonight. So check out that interview. That should be a good one. Anything else, guys, before we run?
Nah, listen, great guest, Robert Berman. Thank you so much, and I learned a lot today. Very interesting. So good stuff, and great. Honestly, the chat was good, man. A lot of good questions, a lot of good stuff. So unfortunately, we can't ask them all. It's just we're limited with time, but some good questions.
Yeah. A lot of questions still to be asked, and I think this discussion is going to continue going on. And I actually think it's the bigger discussion is over AI, because the AI could turn regular cameras into surveillance cameras. But again, like I said, conversation is going to go on. Anyway, thank you guys for joining us. We appreciate it as always. We appreciate you guys in the chat for that lively conversation. And we hope you guys who are on patrol and listening to us, you stay safe and you remain alert. And we'll see you on Friday. Well, we'll see you later on at 5:05 for the executive perspective. But be back here on Friday.
That's right, baby. Thank you, everyone. Like, share, subscribe. We appreciate it.
Well, the John.
There's a handful of retired officers that don't live in the state that have a lot to say about the dream team, as I like to call it. All of a sudden, they retire and have a master plan on how to fight crime, but nothing to contribute when they were here. They want to come back and be part of the dream team. What can I say?